Hello everyone. And welcome to my cold shop. And welcome. Today, this is part 2 of a series of engine swap information that I've accumulated over the years that I'm sharing with you, and it's going to be about primarily this 49 GMC and the repower I did to it to put in a 69 Chevrolet 350 small block Chevy engine. So stay tuned, and while we warm up, we're going to tell you about it. All right, this 1949 GMC, when I traded for it, it had a 250 Chevrolet 6-cylinder engine in it that was blown up. Basically, it had a cracked head and intake manifold. It was the type of 250 that had what they had called the integrated head, which in other words, the intake manifold and the head were cast together as one piece. And unfortunately, you can't replace just the intake manifold or just the head. You got to replace the whole assembly. So I got to doing research on all the parts I was going to need. I believe that the bottom end, I got it running, and I thought the bottom end was all right, but I was going to have to replace the entire top end of it. So research led me to wanting more power, so I decided to go with a small block Chevy. I looked at LS engines, and I looked at the venerable old small blocks, 283s, 327s, and 350s. And I ended up going with a 350. After removing the front clip and stowing it out of the way, I pulled the 250 and 350 transmission as one unit, and it pulled pretty easy that way. Here's a shot of the empty engine bay and those lower clamshell motor mounts. I deal with that big tie rod later. Here's a shot of that C10's lower clamshell mounts that I went back and measured that ended up being the same dimensions as that was in the GMC. Here's a shot of the holes the previous owner cut in the firewall. Here's a shot of the turbo hydromatic 350 stowed out of the way. Here's a shot of that 350 still installed in the C10. After testing it out, I decided this was going to be the engine to repower the GMC. Here's some shots of the underside. I didn't see any trails or leaks, and I was very happy in what I saw underneath. A week or so later, I went and picked it up after he pulled it. It was fitting that the Chevrolet 3100 would be the truck to go get it and transport it back to the shop. Here's a couple pictures of the 350 after it had been pressure washed
and given a couple coats of Chevrolet orange engine paint. It cleaned up real good. Like I said, I didn't see any trails or any evidence of any gaskets blown. The engine really seemed to be in very good shape. With the engine and transmission cleaned up, I bolted them together and did my first mock-up fitment. The right side had plenty of clearance and looked like I could go with any type of exhaust I wanted to try. But as you'll see, I had some problems with the left side. Here I encountered problem number one. As you can see, I had to remove the number 5 plug in order to get the engine down in there, and access to number 7 plug wasn't much better. It looked like the steering gearbox was going to have to be addressed in order to get the clearance I needed. So after unbolting the steering gearbox and moving it out, I tried several combinations of exhaust manifolds to no avail. That late model one, it was just too far. I kicked the box out. These block hugger headers wouldn't work either. They did on the passenger side, but the left side kicked the box out way too much. I even tried 53 and 50, no, 54 and 55 Chevrolet Corvette intake manifolds. Now they would work, but as you'll see how when I compare the manifold ports and the gaskets, that I would have been suffocating that 350 engine, because the those 265 exhaust manifold ports were considerably smaller than the 350s. So much so it was about a 1/4 inch on every side, and I was afraid that it would just, the performance would suffer, so I needed to come up with another solution. And I put these back on eBay and they were quickly grabbed up. Here you can see problem number 2 I ran into, and that was, apparently there's different versions of the upper clamshell mounts for the small block Chevy, and I had 2 different sizes. Here you can see where I went and got one that matched the other side, painted it up here and bolted it in, and I got the engine permanently bolted in with the correct match upper clamshell motor mounts. With the engine properly bolted down, it's time to check for clearances. I've got about 2 fingers clearance between the HEI distributor there and the firewall. That's more than enough that's necessary. Here there's clearance with the harmonic balance and oil pan, with the front axle, and nowhere near the front cross member. So there's plenty of clearance there too. Here I'm doing a mock-up between the engine and where the radiator will bolt, and there's 3 to 4 inches of clearance there. Now a fan will take some of that up, but that's plenty. And here's a shot of the engine from the front, bolted down. Tight, but it does fit. Now that shock there on the left side will be removed. Here's the level on top of the intake manifold where the car bolts, and it's plumb level. Here's some shots of how the transmission fits through the firewall and there in the floor pan. Now the hole is cut slightly larger than necessary, but it was already cut by the previous builder. So I'll make up a panel later that'll cover both holes and not interfere with the accelerator pedal. The exhaust manifolds I ordered that fit a 75 Camaro arrived, and I mocked them up and they fit just exactly like I hoped. I had plenty of clearance for the spark plugs on the left side, and also plenty of clearance to get the steering gearbox back in closer so I wouldn't have to cut so much of the firewall to take up the slant. It was better than I had expected. Here I ran into problem number 3, and you can see the geometry on the drag link is too low and off to the side. The only fix for it would be to remove the pitman arm that I'm showing here and have it bent to offsets, 1 inch and a 3/4 offset. Now you can barely see the bracket I've got mocked up there behind the steering box. Alright, now here is the new bracket permanently bolted in while I'm taking the pitman arm to a machine shop to have it bent. I didn't have the means to do it here. You can see the spots where they bent it in two places to get the offset bent back. I wanted 2 inches, and all they said they could do was 1 3/4 inches, and that is just barely enough. The problem that I would have had if I had not had it bent back would have been bounce steer and a lot of play in the steering. So getting it bent back was a fix for that. And here it is bolted up, and you can see, although not perfectly parallel to the frame, it's close enough to where I won't have the bump steer. With the engine bolted in and all the previous problems rectified, I ordered up some bling and installed it while it was sitting there before I put the clip on. It's a lot easier to do work with the clip off, and I got as much done before I put the clip on. I thought the engine looked pretty good there. There was plenty of clearance for a mechanical fan, but it would have sat too low and maybe even hit the lower cross member. So I decided to go with an electric fan, a 16-inch fan. So I got some spare steel I had in my stash and made up a shroud to mount the fan into it. And subsequent testing after the fact, it does real good. It doesn't run hot, and it probably aids in keeping the cool air flowing through the radiator. Works pretty good. The controller is 200 degrees on and 185 degrees off. Here's a shot of my lower radiator hose workaround, and it works pretty good. It doesn't leak, it flows well, and I have no overheating problems. If I had purchased that radiator, I would have got one without the 90 degrees. But since this radiator came with the truck, I decided I'd go ahead and try to use it and try this workaround. I'm glad I did. It works pretty good. And here's a shot of where a previous owner builder placed the transmission cooler. It was tie wrapped to the front axle. Isn't that something? So I decided to reroute it, a new one, and mount it up there underneath the radiator where it would get very good airflow and not be in the way of anything and not put any warm air back into the radiator. It actually works out pretty good right there. Here's a pic showing how I had to trim around the inner fender so the relocated steering gearbox would work and not interfere with the front clip being reinstalled. I kept the piece and can be welded back in case I go with another type of steering solution in the future. But for now, it works fine.
250, baby. All right. All right, I'll give you one. Well, all right. I believe that'll bring this this episode, this vlog, to an end. I hope you found it informative and interesting. A few things about the modifications I did to get that small block Chevy in there. There are a few changes I would like to make. I've put about 3,500 miles on this setup now, and it's been basically trouble-free. It's been really a fun truck to drive and to put out on the road. But there are a few things I'd like to change. The first thing I'd like to change is that steering. Now, I'm not having any bump steer problems, nor is it wandering all over the road. It does tend to follow cracks in the road, but so does the 49 Chevy. So I think that's just inherent to the straight axle and the kingpin setup. But what I'd like to do is perhaps in a future modification is I'd like to go to power steering on this, and that would entail going with one of the kits that are available online at these aftermarket providers. This one kit uses a 500 series power steering, a GM power steering gearbox that bolts up here on the front of the frame, in front of where the shock would mount, but just behind the brackets of this bumper, I'm sorry. And what it does is you take out your entire old gearbox, you cut your steering column close up to the firewall, and you do away with all that. So number one, that is your clearance you need, all right? And number two, you're going to get the power steering. Now what you utilize then is you use, in the kit, there's a new small pitman arm and a drag link, and you have to go with universal type steering linkages to get to the, and also adapters to get to the existing steering column. Now I think I may go with a new steering column also, something with maybe a tilt, like an I Did It, or what is that, Flaming River. There's two big, or I may even try to find an OEM, like an Astrovan or something like that. But I'd like to do that modification. And I think something like that, when all is said and done, you'll probably have about $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 in the thing. So that's something that you'd really want to do, but that's something that I'm going to do. Now, I also have done some horse trading, and I've got an older, stripped down S10 single cab, long bed frame sitting back behind my shop. Now, I'm toying with the idea of actually swapping this whole getup over to that S10 frame. I've not fully decided yet, but you know, that's something I've got, because I really want to change my front suspension. This truck really likes to run, and it's that that straight axle is just not, this OEM setup is just not conducive to performance. So either the S10, or I may look at an IFS, either a weld-on or a bolt-on kit. Okay, that would entail going with a rack and pinion steering, power or even manual, which would also do away with the existing steering and modernize it up some, get a smaller steering wheel. So that's a mod I'd like to do and change from what I've done already to this truck. As far as the drivetrain, I would think I would like to have an overdrive transmission too. And you know, I can bolt up the 2R, and there's several overdrive transmissions that can be utilized on this that do not require any kind of computer control. So that's another thing I'll look at. Perhaps I'll do a video on that if I ever cross that bridge. But so I would like an overdrive. And performance-wise on the engine, I really like the small block Chevy. I'm a points and distributor carburetor man from way back when. That's what I was raised on. I've got modern electronics in my modern stuff, but stuff that I wrench on for fun. Carburetors and distributors and points, so I can get into that. I've got fully understanding of it and how to work on them. So the small block Chevy fits me great. Now you may be younger and you like the LS, or you may be my age and like the LS. More power to you. It's the small block Chevy with the carburetor fits me good, and I have no problems with that. The automatic choke, starts right up, idles, kicks down. I'm good to go. I don't need a computer to tell me what this thing knows what to do. You know what I mean? So the engine. Now I did do a modification to the engine. When I got it, it came with a Wien single plane 4-barrel manifold, intake manifold, and that's more for. And I had some air leak problems, some vacuum problems, and I traced it to where it wasn't bolted down correctly. I mean, there was like gobs of Permatex or some kind of sealer coming out all around it that wasn't even needed for that. So I knew I was going to pull it. Since I was going to pull it, I decided I was going to go with a dual plane Edelbrock. I'm just more happier with the dual plane because of the RPM range and speeds that I normally drive in takes more advantage of the dual plane than it does the single plane. If I was taking this thing to the strip or I was out here running on the streets, at high RPM, single plane would make sense. Dual plane is where I normally operate in, so that makes sense, and it's worked great. Now I did have to put a spacer in between the carburetor and the manifold because the problem I ran into was that on hot restarts, let's say I drove around, I pulled in to get me a cup of coffee or visit someone for a little bit, coming back out and restarting could be a pain because what would happen is the manifold so hot it would heat up the carburetor and it would boil over fuel out of the float bowl into the venturi and down into the intake, making it rich, overly rich, and you don't need to be rich to restart a warmed up engine. So that spacer did the trick. It isolates that heat from the intake manifold from the carburetor enough to where I don't have any restart problem. Otherwise, let's see, I haven't done any other modifications. Now the HEI was not OEM for this year engine. I really don't know the full history of this engine, but other than it ran great and the numbers stamped on the blocks, that tells me it's a 69 and the 300 horsepower. I don't know if it's 2-bolt, I don't know if it's the 4-bolt. I understand 300 horsepower could have came in either, so who knows, right? And it doesn't smoke, no sounds, no bad sounds, doesn't run hot. In other words, it's running so good I don't need to fix it. Oh, how's that, huh? But anyway, I would like the overdrive transmission, and I would like to change the power steering. Other than that, I don't know. Maybe the front end, the suspension, so it would handle better. Maybe air conditioning. I can keep doing the maybes, add it on, throw more money at it. So if I do air conditioning, I got a lot of cab work to do to get insulation, get all them holes plugged and all. And I do have one more window to deal with as far as cracks, well two, the vent window and the main window on the passenger side. Other than that, this truck is very roadable and I enjoy driving it all the time. So anyway, I think that should cover it. It's by no means the ultimate V8 how-to. There's more ways to do it. There's different types of manifolds people use, headers. I mean, everything that you look it up and you can see it. This is just how I did it. So I want to thank you for watching. I hope all is going good with you and yours. As you could have seen from the open intro, it's Christmas time around here. So I wish you and yours a very Merry Christmas. And let's see, well, I guess that'll do it. So have a good one, and we'll see you around on the next one. See you.